My name's Robert Shapton. I'm Managing Director of TMS Training Solutions. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. And I hope that you, your colleagues and your families are coping and staying safe in these unprecedented times. As we wonder about the future of what it holds for us in COVID-19, TMS Training Solutions are running a series of free airfield lighting webinars for the next 3 weeks to share our vision for competency-based training for the next generation of aviation professionals. The objective of these webinars will be to focus on the new regulatory environments, the regulatory requirements, updating you on industry developments relating to safety, competence and compliance in this fast-changing world. But also we want to bring you up to speed with the latest developments from our regulators, new regulations, practices, trying to coordinate the return to what we hope will be normality, or the new normal as it will ultimately be. So we're pleased to share ICAO's vision and plans for the next generation of aviation professionals, but as I said, with a particular flavour on the hopeful recovery to normal traffic levels. And I'll talk a bit more about that, and Keith will talk a lot more about that in the future, in the rest of this presentation. In particular, we'll be talking about our understanding of the new requirements that are coming from our regulators for registration in relation to competence and certification for aerodrome personnel to determine, the people that are allowed to work on our airfields and in other capacities in our industry. So, as I said, we'll be talking about latest news, but particularly in the context of safety, compliance and competence and the requirements for the future. So looking at latest news, we can see, I think you're all familiar, traffic levels have reduced significantly. At the end of April, passenger travel reduced to virtually nothing, and even cargo traffic was down, though the latest figures that I've seen are that it's not significantly lower. And if you look on Flight Radar 24, you can still see predominantly cargo traffic traversing the skies. The forecast of passenger traffic, which is by far the largest volume, of course, is that by various projections, we will recover in the next year to levels that will be 15% below what they were before COVID-19, or 25% according to how you view the future. Yet it will depend a great deal as to how the aviation authorities and national authorities actually respond and coordinate the activities in light of the way in which the disease develops. Everybody's very fearful of this second phase, but of course we're at second wave, but of course we have no idea where this will go at this time. But aviation will have to respond and react accordingly. Safety remains of paramount importance in our industry, whether we have one plane or 100 planes. Clearly, if you're working at an airfield, the dangers remain. There's the potential still for bad things to happen. I was at IES, which is the largest aviation conference in the United States last year, and we saw that a presentation made which talked about two of our colleagues in North America unfortunately died whilst working on an airfield. So it still behoves us all to be very, very careful to make sure everybody is trained, is very aware of the risks, and to as great an extent as possible stay safe. The compliance is another key element of what we do. That's why we work on airfields. The objective is that the airfield lighting system and the other visual aids remain compliant at all times to provide the necessary visual guidance so that planes can navigate safely onto the runway and back when they land, back to the stand. This is particularly relevant in the context of CDM, which Keith will be talking about, collaborative decision making, and the new requirements that will place on us all as aviation professionals. And finally, Keith will be talking and majoring, in fact, on the subject of competency, the ability to do something successfully or efficiently. Competency-based training and assessment is the future for the aviation industry. It's no longer good enough to be competent, but we actually have to demonstrate that to third parties that we are competent and fit to work on an airfield. And this is being increasingly required by the regulatory requirements. And Keith will be talking about that and the initiatives being led by ICAO principally to mandate this requirement. So, without any further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Keith, who will present to you who will take you through the detailed presentation of our webinar and the requirements for safety, competence, and compliance, and in particular the current state of affairs with COVID-19 and what the regulators are saying about what we must do as aviation professionals. So I'd like to hand you over now to Keith Costell. Thank you.
Hi everybody, thank you very much, Robert. Welcome to our really short webinars. It's not training courses, because our standard training courses are, either 3 days or 4 days or 5 days, etc. Either, on site or as many people will know. As Robert explained, we've kind of split our series of webinars into three. If necessary, we will do a fourth, but we've split them into 3 consecutive weeks. This week is really talking about, as Robert explained, associated with the regulatory requirements and what's been happening associated with COVID-19. But in weeks 2 and 3, we'll get more into the engineering elements, and we'll have a really good discussion, hopefully. But what I would like to say, if you've got any questions, please ask the questions and send them to them. We don't think we're going to be able to answer every single question during a webinar, so we will take the list of questions if you send them in on the chat, etc. And then we will, within the next few days, we will respond to you with answers to any of the questions. Also, during the series of webinars, we're going to have reference to certain documents and to certain videos that are available. Now, these will all be available to you on a link through our website. So all you need to do is to contact us. So we'll have a little discussion about that in a short while. So let's move on to the situation today and the situation before COVID-19, because the key issue before COVID-19 was, our job functions was already getting harder. We've got the low-cost airlines, which are there's lots and lots more traffic. The low-cost airlines, don't want to use some of the facilities, but they want to get in and get out and, throw the passengers off and throw the passengers on as quickly as possible. If they cannot meet the timescales, there's a claims culture associated with that. We've put down here like larger aeroplanes, but, the cargo aircraft, and the cargo aircraft have been really, really active during COVID-19. But cargo aircraft, they arrive, they're heavy, they place great demands on our facilities, right? And also what I'm going to be discussing is the increasing tougher regulatory requirements upon us. We are, as Robert already mentioned, we are going to have to demonstrate compliance more effectively. We're going to demonstrate that we, as people, the persons who look after AGL, are competent to do the job and have our associated record keeping documents available for inspection. But the key issue for us is, where is AGL going? New technology. We've already discussed through many training courses in the past about the slow progression from tungsten halogen to LEDs, the progression in the power supply unit, communication needs, as Robert mentioned, as part of collaborative decision making. There is a whole lot of technology being introduced. And we, in engineering, need to be able to have the records in place to demonstrate all the elements associated with looking after and making our system compliant. And the asset management requirements, and we're not just talking about just the runway or the taxiway on their own, but we are also talking about the detail and the regularity of how we do our maintenance. And then twinned with this, we've got issues associated with expansions. We already know that traffic density prior to COVID-19 was putting great demands upon our facility. And therefore, there's been lots of programs associated with how we can use existing infrastructure more efficiently. Well, so we have a whole range, and let's take, I come from in the United Kingdom, we take London Heathrow. I think most people have heard of London Heathrow. They're looking to have a third runway. Whether we'll ever have one, I don't know. But there are other major cities. Let's take Dublin in Ireland. They're already building a new runway and facilities. So all these will impact on us in people and maintenance. But let's start with right at the beginning. Every flight starts and ends at an aerodrome, we hope. And we've seen airstrips develop into pretty complex facilities. And there are vast areas associated with those runways and taxiways, and the layouts of aerodromes are all different. So there's a multitude of issues to consider. There's also this multitude of technologies and equipment. And the pressures on us, I mentioned earlier, have been highly demanding, but COVID-19 is going to bring these additional demands. For example, lots of the aerodromes have either decided, if there's a 2-runway airport, they've now closed one runway and only using a single runway for takeoff and landings. So what's happening with the other runway and the taxiways? We're parking up aircraft. The systems have been shut down. What happens when we reactivate those systems? And so there are some regulatory demands upon us associated with the return back, what we hope, to normal operations. One such consideration really comes from the ultimate directive, which is ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. And they have issued an ICAO handbook to the civil aviation authorities, this document called 10144, ICAO document 10144. We have it, it's available to you if you wish it. But you've got to take into consideration, ICAO issued directives to civil aviation authorities. Now, the civil aviation authorities can be regional and it can be national. Where we are in the United Kingdom, we are part of Europe. Well, before Brexit, of course. But we're still in aviation part of Europe. And EASA and Eurocontrol is where we have our directives from. Eurocontrol for the air traffic side EASA, the European Union Aviation Safety Agency, is for the aerodromes. So they've issued this new, ICAO have issued this new document. But if we look at the overall aspect, this is not new. What is new, and we've got here as a news flash, is that they've also issued a new document, another document of the vision towards in the future. It's called the Global Aviation Safety Plan. So they've reissued this document, 10004, and this is associated with what is required in line with what is happening as we return to normal operations from COVID-19. So again, this document 10004 is in draft form. We have it, it's available to you. So let's go back to where I come from, and your regional and your national authorities are going to be looking at things similarly. In EASA, they've issued a guidance document for aerodromes on the preparations to resume safe operations. And within this document, what they have done is list a whole range of items that have to be demonstrated. I've already mentioned in many aerodromes, then runways and taxiways will be used with parking aircraft. We've got to return those runways and taxiways into operational use. And Robert explained, and we think we all know, we don't really know when operations are going to restart fully, you know, towards previous levels. Now, Robert already explained and showed a graph which Eurocontrol had issued associated with what's happening in Europe. What has happened there is that traffic density has dropped 85 to 90%. We're starting to claw back very, very slowly. However, in preparation to returning back to these, our systems back to normal operations, I mentioned EASA have issued these whole list of items. Item 2 is particularly interesting for us because this is the exact statement: the proper functioning of electrical power supply systems for air navigation facilities and lighting system, including signs. That's the guidance signs. What does that actually mean? Well, the power supply? Well, actually, how can you demonstrate proper functioning of the system? Well, you need to have a maintenance management system in place of some description. So there are tools available to assist in us doing that. But you've got to demonstrate the performance of your AGL. It's no good just having your electrical power supply switched on and switched off. I already mentioned that there are kilometers and kilometers and kilometers of cable under the ground with connectors, all living underwater. So they've been sat cold soaked, as we would call it in the industry. When you switch them on, are the lights going to work? Are they going to work efficiently, correctly? We need to demonstrate. You can only do that by having an accurate and repeatable photometric tool. So, but who's going to use these tools? Do you have these tools? You've got to be competent, trained and authorized. The EASA proper functioning talks about the power supply. How are you going to demonstrate your system is going to be electrically safe? Never mind having the correct photometric output, how is it going to be electrically safe? So you need to be trained and authorized and know how to use the tools to demonstrate that. Because remember, you cannot demonstrate compliance if you cannot measure. It's a simple, that's a lovely statement, that, eh? Remember, you cannot manage that you cannot measure. What a lovely statement that is. So true, eh? So let's move on. In the past 2 weeks, in fact, on May the 4th, ICAO held a virtual meeting associated with competency and us as people. And it was part of an ongoing discussion, but of course, COVID-19 has highlighted the fact that many of the people in our industry, including ourselves, have been put on long-term leave or furloughed, as some people call it, you know, and the potential is that because of the lack of income and the reduction in those commercial revenues by airports, you're going to be looking at staffing levels. Can we afford a reduction in staffing levels? I think not. It doesn't matter whether there's 2 aircraft landing on your runway or 102 aircraft landing on your runway in a 24-hour period. That runway and that taxiway has to be compliant. And therefore, we need to have people doing exactly the same job after COVID-19 as we had before COVID-19. So coming back to this competency element, training packages previously have been knowledge-based. And some of you will recognize from some training providers, such courses as AGL1, AGL2, AGL3, etc., etc. Now, I was involved in the development of those 20 years ago. Now we need to have not just knowledge, but we need to demonstrate the skill. And to have the knowledge and to demonstrate the skill, then we have to know what those competencies are. What is the job function? So competency, we've already mentioned, is the ability to function and have the knowledge to do the work. But competencies is associated with defining, are you a designer? Are you an installation contractor? Are you a maintenance contractor? 3 typical job functions, different jobs. We look at the different technologies. We look at the elements associated with what's in an AGL system: power, control, and the field circuits. 3 specific areas. So the whole element of training for AGL is coming under in the limelight. We have been left behind previously by the regulatory authorities. They've looked after pilots, they've looked after aircrew, they look after the firemen, they look after the electronics personnel and define things very, very clearly. When it came to AGL, who are we? Oh, you're an electrician. You're an electrician, you've got electrical qualification, you can go and work on the airfield. But when I did my electrical training, nobody ever mentioned constant current. It was all constant voltage technology. There is a difference. We all know there is a difference. And we have voltages up to and including 4,545 volts. That is just below 5,000 volts. And if we got an open circuit in the field, 2 and 3 times higher than that at 6.6 amps voltage. Voltage burns you, current kills you. It's as simple as that in electrical engineering. So we've been taking people who are trained electricians in control from that environment, building technology basically, and saying we can work in the field. And there's been so many on-the-job trainings. Now, on the job, if you've got a bad practice on the job, that gets passed on. So we need to define exactly what the education packages are, and we need to demonstrate it. So this is why we call it CBTA now. It's competency-based training and assessment. So what do we need to do? Are we going to move our system forward? We need to have suitable people managed correctly as part of a safety management system. We have to demonstrate AGL performance and the maintenance records, and we need to have the records available on the competency of us as people who work on AGL. Remember, the ICAO and your local civil aviation inspector is going to be watching. You know, COVID-19 has really highlighted this. So we have to be ready. So the key issue is, for me, safety, competency, and if you get competency and safety packaged, we can demonstrate compliance. So what are the objectives of AGL maintenance, Efficient AGL maintenance. Well, why do we have maintenance? To keep the system serviceable, to aid in the safe operation of the aircraft. And the equipment serviceability depends upon the effectiveness of us, the people who are maintaining, either installing, commissioning, or maintaining the AGL. And not forgetting the suppliers, because we'll look at that aspect in a few minutes. And we need to have a maintenance control system in place. So let's just remind ourselves about AGL. We've got a substation or a vault or whatever you call it, a building, several buildings out in the airfield where we put the power supplies in. But that power supply is constant current output, but constant voltage in. So it's a converter. So this power unit's a converter. The only thing is, on our constant voltage systems, we have lots of safety protection devices. Not so when we look at a constant current regulator and the output into the field, because the idea is we keep those lights burning. So we have the power supply, we have the field circuit, kilometers and kilometers and kilometers of cabling, lots and lots of connectors, all living in housings in the field, which we call transformer pits or whatever, all living underwater in many cases, all waiting to fail. It's as simple as that. And we have the lighting systems that we all want each of our systems lights to have the same intensity as selected by a control system. Now the control system, that's way up in the operator for the control system is way up in the control tower, many kilometers away from where the light fixtures are and from where the power units are. So we need to have command and control facility, and we need to know what is happening, which we call back indication in the industry. So these are what I would call the 3 blocks of AGL. And when we look at these 3 blocks of AGL, that's the way in the next 2 weeks I'm going to be talking about it. So power, lighting, control. Now let's have a look at the real needs associated with compliancy. We need to have correctly selected equipment, correctly installed, and they need to have an acceptance criteria in place. No good saying, oh yeah, this is the standard. The lights have got to give you the absolute minimum 50% light output, for example. Well, unless you lay down your acceptance criteria, then if it's 51%, it's serviceable. Well, we already know that's not acceptable. When we're looking at the electrical side, we look at the quality of the field circuit. And we measure the insulation resistance value. And we put some minimum requirements in. No point in and asking an installation contractor or a main contractor to install a system and then give it to you at, 1% over the minimum requirement. So this installation and material element is very important. But increasingly, we cannot have, to be able to do that correctly without the correct tools and equipment, whether it's installation equipment, maintenance equipment, etc. We need to have the suitable instructions from the manufacturers, and we need to have spare parts. I come from the aircraft engineering world initially, and I remember seeing a lovely t-shirt saying, "We have the technology, but nobody will give us the parts." I thought, how true is that? Eh? How true. But now let's have a look at us as people. I've already mentioned trained staff, experience at high voltage. When I talk high voltage, voltage in excess of 1000 volts. That's what I'm really talking about. And the inspection programs associated. Do we have an inspection program? Is it being done correctly to ensure the equipment's in good condition? And remember though, as part of inspection programs, there's breakdown maintenance and there's preventive maintenance. So really 4 blocks. So if you ask me to come and have a look at your AGL system, then I would look at it under these 4 areas. The department, the AGL department. What are you? Are you a traditional department, the boss, technician, etc.? And are they authorized? And who authorizes them? It's mandatory. It is the law. It is the law in all our countries that when an electrical system has the potential to have 1000 volts or above, you shall employ persons who are authorized, trained and authorized accordingly. So in AGL, we fall under that umbrella. It is the law in your land. So just a bit of a summary then. What do we need? A whole package of things: reference documents, maintenance, the organization, the attitude, the attitude to do maintenance, the scheduling and the records, etc., etc. And therefore, if you're really looking at 3 simple words to explain it, you have to have the knowledge, you need to be able to apply that knowledge as a skill, and have the correct attitude. Have those 3 things and we'll be all okay. Let's have a look at technology though, because there is danger of introducing technology. We know technology is going to help us with safe operations. Follow the green, for example, to help a pilot be able to go from the runway to the parking position in the apron and vice versa back to the runway for takeoff. Follow the green technology by being able to control taxiway centerline lights. But somebody's got to look after them and understand them. And the new technologies then mean training. How many times have you had new equipment but not had suitable training? Or somebody comes with new equipment and does a demonstration and says, can you use it? You say, yes. But do you demonstrate that you can use it? Very important to have a competency-based training and assessment program in place. And many airports, and with due respect to them, are working and been implementing this in an excellent way. But there are many others that do not. But also, we should also make sure that the technology doesn't leave us behind in terms of being able to absorb the information. An old friend of mine used to always explain to me, sadly he's passed away now, You always say, oh, this is Keith. It says, my English mate, he said, he changes the bulbs on the airfield. Yeah. I said, yeah, that's what I do. I change the bulbs on the airfield. But we all know it's a little bit more complicated than that. Eh? A little bit more complicated. So let's have a look at competency a little bit more. Right? ICAO actually over the last few years undertook a safety oversight, and they came out with 8 specific critical elements. And in these 8 critical elements, critical element number 4 was all about qualified technical personnel. Basically, what they said is there is a lack of qualified, an insufficient number of qualified inspectors. So we're talking about CAA as well, and aviation personnel in these highly specialized technical areas of safety. And they've issued a document, Annex 19, which refers to this. So what about qualification of technical personnel? Why competency-based training? What do we deliver? Yeah, we deliver training for Airfield Ground Lighting, a lot of bespoke trainings. But in what structure will we do it in the future? The structure that we will be doing it in the future is associated with the way all the other aviation related personnel, in terms of the electronics personnel, look after the ILS, the radars, etc., and the engineers that look after the aircraft. They have it in phases. Their training comes in phases. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. Basic training, qualification training, continuation training, and development training. So TMS Training Solutions, we've put together a package associated with that, and that's available to you should you wish to contact us. So, however, for the purposes of this webinar, we've kind of packaged those those together into steps. So step 1, as part of these webinars, will be about working safety airside. We are not going to spend a lot of time on it because we have 2 videos that are available for you online. Step 2 is about the detail about Airfield Ground Lighting. Not just the detail of what we have today, but the detail of what the operational needs are for tomorrow, and the technology advantages that are included. But we will stick also in step 3 to the safety side. Robert just introduced somebody who had been, in the US that had been killed. There have been quite a few fatalities over the years that have been created by AGL. I would say to you, as an electrician, and for those of you who are electricians, have you ever had an electric shock? You answer that to yourself. And when you got that electric shock, why did you get that electric shock? Why? You did something wrong. It's as simple as that. So electrical safety, over 1,000 volts, 6.6 amps on a traditional system, kills. So what we're going to do now is really summarize, we look forward to the next 2 weeks because we'll get into the engineering side in greater depth. This, I think, now I'll probably reintroduce Robert again. And on this slide, Robert, that we've got up on the screen, which is basically saying, the TMS Training Solutions lighting webinar, and and our contact details. So maybe, Robert, I could say, can you now rejoin us? And,
absolutely. Thank you very much, Keith. That was very informative. Safety, as you say, safety, competence, and compliance have always been relevant. It's just the requirements are evolving, And Keith, there's no one better than Keith to tell you exactly what those changes are and what the future will look like. But our job is to...
Robert, maybe I could just jump in here. This is probably a good time for us to have a bit of interaction. This is all new to us, eh? You know, we've been in remote locations, but the interactive side of having this webinar is for us to be able to jump in. And the two areas which is really, really important is for us all to remember that ICAO is a performance-based. The ICAO will say, this is what you have to achieve aircraft safety. It's performance-based, but they do not tell us how to do it. Yet the IEC, the International Electrotechnical Commission, based in Switzerland, they have a group, the Technical Committee 97, and that Technical Committee 97, made up of voluntary persons from around the world, then define the technical specifications. And there are a new document being produced. When I say a new document, there's a document called the IEC 61820, 61820 as for some people, and that is going to be completely rewritten. Part 1 is out already, but in there will be a whole load of sections associated with installation, design, etc. in AGL. But one particular section will be about qualified personnel and competency for aerodrome persons. The same as ICAO are discussing. Okay, so the two aspects will come together.
Right, thank you, Keith. Yes, so we will be bringing you more information on all these new requirements and regulations, basically surrounding the processes and how you demonstrate competence, compliance, and safe working. We will provide links to the relatives. We'll provide you the information on our webinars over the next 2 weeks, and we'll be providing links to the relevant documents on our TMS Training Solutions website, and you will receive details of our resources and all contact details via an email sent to all participants following this webinar. So you don't have to write any details down. You'll also have access to a recording of this webinar if there are any bits you may have missed or you were late joining us. And over the next 2 weeks, as Keith said, we will be going into the detail of safe working practices airside with the help of 2 very informative videos that will be provided on the website. We won't be showing them on the webinar because they would take too long, but those resources will be available for you and your colleagues. We'll be going through airfield ground lighting in more detail, the standards, principles and layouts, all details about the power supply systems, how the lighting works, the circuits, control systems, about safety and compliance, and there will be some more video resources also to support those presentations, again available via our website. And Keith, so we will be holding these webinars for the next 2 Tuesdays at the same time. So TMS Tuesday, every Tuesday at 2 p.m. UK London time. We'll be presenting 2 more 1-hour webinars to cover that in more detail. We will also be responding to your questions. We've had some during the course of this webinar. 2 particular areas. One, we were asked about the provision of the information, provision of copies of the presentations. That will be on our, we will give you that via our emails after this presentation. We were asked also about logbooks and the requirements for apparently in Iran there are already requirements to maintain logbooks to demonstrate compliance and the work undertaken by individual engineers.
Maybe I could jump in there, Robert.
Yes.
You know, my colleague, you know, friend in Iran, cooperated, discussed this element with me quite some time ago. And as you know, in the United Kingdom, we've had the Airfield Light. We've got the Airfield Lighting Association, of which was formerly known as the UK's AGL Safety and Competency Working Group, and within that group, the logbook concept is under discussion and under trial, and it's going to be very important because it's all about demonstrating that you have the suitable knowledge training and you can demonstrate your skill in a document that is recognized. You know, so I'm really pleased that you know, my colleague in Iran that I communicate with quite regularly on this subject has ensured that it's being trialed and implemented there.
We've also been asked, Keith, is it a requirement? Is retraining a requirement for authorized electrical personnel? And if so, how often?
Well, that's an interesting thing. It depends on our different countries. You know, then within all our different, we have our electrical regulations, and AGL is still part of the electrical regulations per country. Now, the time scale in different countries kind of have a little different, but nominally, when we're talking now in the future associated with AGL, we think around a 3-year cycle would be appropriate. I'm not saying that's fixed and firm at this moment of time, but that's one of the discussions that we've been having on when should we be retrained. It's not just retrained in, say, working with authorized persons, it's how long does your knowledge last? You know, especially in this fast changing technology age. You know, you mentioned collaborative decision making, and when we're looking at you know, the follow the green technology, when we're looking at some of the suppliers are introducing new technologies. I just had a webinar, went on a webinar 2 weeks ago where a taxiway centre line can change from green to red. And whether that's approved or not, I don't know. But the concept is that if there's a problem ahead, the green taxiway centre line will change to red. And pilots know you don't cross a red line. So, you know, those kind of technologies are being introduced all the time. But they also bring different demands, of course. Eh? And when we're looking at the power supply, when we're looking at the introduction of IGBT CCRs into a traditional system, it used pulse width modulation in part of the technology. Yet when we're introducing light fixtures that have individual light control and monitoring, well, they have PWM technology involved. Are the two types of technology compatible? As we all know, you know, if in any engineering, if something goes wrong with the system, you look at the interfaces first, okay? And those interfaces, I mean, I had one person talking to me on the phone only in the last 2 weeks and said, in the new technology of the lighting system, Keith, can you change from static lights to strobe lights? I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, some of our lights flash. Oh, I said, that's interesting. I said, but I'm afraid the answer is no. They do not change from static light output to strobe lights. You know, there is a problem, and that problem has to be investigated. So there's just a typical example. These are the type of questions that we get, eh? But we can help. We can help.
Yeah. Yes, Keith, we have we're coming up to the end of our hour for today, but we have a large number of questions coming in, and I think if we can take them offline, and we will, when we send you our post webinar email, we will answer those questions in the email to you, because they're good questions. It's just we don't have time for them all just at this moment. But so I'd like to thank you all very much. We will be focusing on the items that Keith illustrated earlier. There's an awful lot of content there. So, but if there's specific areas you would like us to focus on more than others, do let us know. This is for you after all. We want to make it as useful and relevant as possible. And if you have any questions, I'd be very surprised if Keith couldn't answer them, but I'm sure we have access to the resources which could answer any of them. So, and it would be, we'd love to help you. So please, we'll send you an invitation, we'll send you an email. We hope to see you back next Tuesday, 2 p.m. London time, for another TMS Tuesday. Thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody.
Guys. Thank you, everybody around the world. Bye. And welcome to my home in the UK.
Thank you. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye. Stay strong. Stay safe. Bye.